Okay, a very big welcome to Pennine Ham Amateur Radio Club. Good to see people joining us for tonight's meeting. Load of people, some of whom I know and one or two I don't know at all. Everyone's welcome. You don't have to be a club member. Very pleased to see Richard from Denbydale. Nice to see Richard at our meeting tonight. Richard, I'm sure we'll see one or two familiar faces from the original meetings that Denbydale used to run. Good evening to everyone else. I think I've said hello to most people in person, but if I missed you, my apologies. I'm Nick, G4IWO, the club chair of Pennine Ham. We're really pleased tonight to have a presentation given to us by Steve, AA4BW, out in Georgia in the US. A number of us from Pennine Ham Club met Steve because at the Northern Amateur Radio Society rally earlier this year in Blackpool, we agreed as a club, Pennine Ham agreed as a club. We've got a number of QRP club members, GQRP club members who are officers and members of the club, that we would offer the GQRP club our help in running their stand if they weren't able to run it at the Blackpool rally, which we did. And then we also did it at the National Ham Fest as well. And we've had great fun in doing that. We've met a lot of people, made a lot of new friends there. One of those we met at Blackpool earlier this year was Steve, AA4BW. He'd come over on what you described, Steve, as partly a working holiday, but an opportunity to look at the Lake District, have a wander around the Lake District and enjoy hiking and fishing in the Lake District. And I know, Steve, you write about that as your one of your occupations, or your main occupation out there in Georgia, but also amateur radio, and you offered to come and spend a few hours with us at Blackpool, which you did, and we were very pleased, Steve, to have you join us between the two stands that we were looking after of our own club and the GQRP club as well. And Steve, AA4BW, is also a member of the GQRP club. So welcome very much to Steve, who we met for the first time out there. And welcome, of course, to a number of people in the room here who are also part of the GQRP club. So always welcome at our meetings. Some of you are already club members, some of you aren't. But as we've said to people in the past, come to as many meetings as you want. You'll never be asked to join. It's up to you if you'd like to actually become a member of Pennine Ham, but you can come as many times as you like. Just before I hand the microphone over to Steve, as you can see, Steve's screen is on there. You'll see him on the camera screen. There is a blue screen. He failed to get his camera working on the computer he's using today, and we spent a little while earlier before the meeting this evening to see if we could sort that out, and unfortunately we couldn't. So Steve is on without a camera. Oh, he is now. Steve, you've done it.
I'm back.
Steve, brilliant. Well done. We fiddled around earlier and we didn't achieve that. You just need to slightly reorient your webcam so you get your whole face in rather than half your face.
Let's see. Let me do that.
That's better.
Let me do that. Is that better there?
Yeah, that's absolutely super. Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, excellent. Very good.
So look, Steve, over to you really, and I'll let you set your slides up and we'll just check that's working and let you carry on with it.
All right. If you will tell me, Nick, are we looking at the PowerPoint now? Can we see that?
No, we're not looking at the PowerPoint. No.
Okay. Let's see. So we need to find a way to share it, I think.
Need to hit the share screen button.
Let's see. Let me find the share screen button. Will you tell me where that is?
Well,
I'm a writer, you know.
It's on the bottom of the screen, isn't it? Can you find it? You've got a program bar across the bottom. You've got audio and video on the left.
And it's green.
It's green. Well, let's see.
Thank you, Jeff.
It's green, yeah.
The share button.
Unless you are colorblind like me, but it's green.
Let me see here. We
bottom.
just had it at the bottom.
Okay.
I'm not sure what y'all are seeing that I'm seeing here.
We're just seeing you. We're still seeing you at the moment. You need to hit.
Still seeing me.
So
well,
you need to hit that. You need to hit that share button.
That's what I've got to find.
Oh, yeah, that's what you need to find first.
We'll just look at everything here and see if we can find it. I don't know where to look.
You may have your cursor in the wrong place where you can't see it.
That's entirely possible.
Move your cursor up and down and see if a little black spot appears across the bottom with a whole line of options: audio, video, participate, chat, react, share.
Can now see your presentation, Steve.
Oh, golly.
We're
Man, I
there.
tell you.
Well
Once
done.
again, science triumphs over ignorance and superstitions. All right. Are we good to give this a shot now?
We're good. We're good to go.
All right. Well, thank you all. And I remember years and years ago, there was a movement in ham radio, I guess when they were starting incentive licensing in the United States. I was much younger. And the big debate was about how that was going to turn ham radio into a hobby of appliance operators. And I'd been a ham for a long time, so I got all indignant about that. But I have to admit that when it comes to computers, I am an appliance operator. It's like a washing machine with a keyboard, and I want it to wash my clothes. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. But we triumphed here. So thank you, Dick, and everyone. Thank you for being so patient while I figured that out. And thank you for laughing with me. You can laugh at me if you would like. That's okay. What we're going to talk about today is something that I think is a lot of fun, and that is playing with antennas using fishing poles, telescoping fishing poles as sort of the base for these things. I love to fish. I've loved to fish since I was very young. The lovely lady in the picture there is my bride. Tricia and I are fairly newlyweds. We both lost spouses in years past, and we're blessed to meet each other. And on one of our very first dates, golly, it's weird to talk about dating at my age. On one of my very first dates, we were going to dinner, and I said to her, I said, Tricia, have you ever been fly fishing? Okay, she had to say yes. I had a captive audience at that point. And we went fly fishing. We went to a little creek with a telescopic rod, and she made a cast and she caught a fish, and it just got better and better from there. So that's Tricia in the picture. The rod she's holding is a telescoping rod. It's a captive rod called a Tenkara rod. Now, let me get over to the PowerPoint so I can, I hate to click anything. Why are we not changing pictures here?
Right, you need to put your cursor on the PowerPoint first, so that makes that active, and then you can move it left. You can move it on with the arrow buttons on the bottom of your keyboard.
Okay, now that's all gone away. Oh, great. Okay, let's see here. We're gonna do this. We're gonna make this work. We are going to make it work. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about fishing for a little while. There's two kinds of fly fishing. This is your fly fishing education for the day. There's the traditional Western style of fly fishing, which has a fly rod and a reel and a big line about 100 feet long and all that. And it's a lot of fun. But there's another kind of fly fishing. The other kind of fly fishing is something that originated in Japan centuries ago. It's called Tenkara fly fishing. Tenkara fly fishing uses telescoping rods like this one. They telescope, they don't have a reel. They have a fixed length of line. And that's probably more than you want to know about fishing today. But for our purposes, the thing is, these telescoping rods do two things. They telescope down short, which makes them easy to carry, and they telescope out long, which makes them great for playing with antennas. We're going to talk about playing with antennas. And what I'm going to start with is looking at how do we pick a rod or a pole, I guess in this sense, pole is probably a more accurate term for it. How do we pick a pole if we're going to use one to have some sort of an antenna application for ham radio? How do you do that? How do you pick one? Well, there's a couple things to consider. What is the kind of pole you're going to pick? And you'll find, for all intents and purposes, basically two. One is something made of fiberglass, which has the advantage of being inexpensive. It's also transparent to RF. It's a little bit heavier than graphite, but it's a little more durable. The other kind is, as you guessed, graphite. Graphite is a little more expensive. It's a little lighter weight, which is a plus. It's not transparent to RF. It's more translucent, they tell me. That may or may not be a factor. But these are the two you look at. You have your fiberglass poles on the one hand, and you have your graphite poles on the other. I use both, and we'll talk about both tonight. We'll talk some about how you can pick which one you want to use. The second thing to think about is how long is it? Now, the first length you think about is the length when it's extended. And you can get these extendable telescoping poles at lengths from just 4 or 5 feet, maybe 1.5 meters or so, up to very long ones, 10 meters, about 30 feet. You can go to different kinds of poles, for example, handles for extendable fishing nets that can get even longer than that. But most of the poles you're going to see will run in the 4, 5, 6 meter range. You'll find one and it will come to you looking like this. This is one in a case. The pole is here. If you can see the little picture of me, there's an end cap that you take off to pull the pieces out. There's a bottom cap which keeps it together for fishing. And when we're using this as a ham antenna support, we'll actually take this off, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. This particular one is an Asian pole. It came from China, I think. But that's basically all there is to them. It's a telescoping pole that has a long extended length and a collapsed length. Now, the collapsed length becomes important for 2 reasons. One is that you want it to be collapsible enough to carry, perhaps in your day pack, maybe just stick it in your pocket. But you also can think of it, if you have certain models, as a walking stick. I have a couple of long ones that are about a little over 1 meter long, and I'll use those as hiking sticks. And then when I get where I'm going, I extend it and use it as an antenna. When I'm done, I collapse it and use it as a hiking stick to help me get home. So the 2 things we're thinking about are, first, the material. Fiberglass or graphite, either works in different situations. And secondly, the length, collapsed versus extended. And you just have to think about that based on what you're doing. If you're hiking, the hiking stick application can be good. If you're in the car, that's irrelevant. But those are the 2 things you want to think about. You can get these lots of different places. There's a local, I say local, it's a U.S. Supplier of them called BNMPoles.com. I don't have a connection with them, but I like their poles. I like the company. The folks there are very understanding of ham radio, and there's their website. B&M poles came out years ago with a line of telescoping poles for fishing for warm water fish like catfish. These became wildly popular in the fishing world. Hams discovered them a while back, and they're great fun to play with. They have some fiberglass ones and they have graphite ones as well. The ones I like the best are this one, and this is probably the one I use the most myself. It's a 20-foot pole, a 6-section pole that in the U.S. sells for about $30. I did talk to the owner of the company, whose name is Jack, and told him I was going to be talking to my friends in the UK and asked if they shipped to the UK. He said, yes, they do. I don't know any details about that, but he says that can happen. So I'll leave that up to you to figure that out if that's what you decide you want. But it's a neat pole. This particular one is fiberglass. It's not terribly expensive, and it's pretty durable. I've knocked it over a bunch of times, and it still keeps going. There are a lot of other possibilities, too. One that I like to play with endlessly is looking at Amazon, but especially at AliExpress and Temu and suppliers like that. Those poles can be very, very inexpensive, but it is sort of a roll of the dice when you do that. I've had some good success. The one I just showed you was a good one. I've had some that I have gotten there that were not so good. They end up in a corner where I guess they'll sit until forever. But they have the big advantage of being really, really inexpensive. You can buy the poles from AliExpress or Temu sometimes for $10 to $15. And if you work it right, they'll ship them for free. It takes forever to get them sometimes, but that's another possibility to think about. Now, one that I do like there is this company. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but you see this company, Sougailang, and they make a lot of pretty good fishing tackle. I've got some of their regular gear that I like. But here's a pole. This is a 5.4 meter pole for less than $10 US on sale. So you can look for those, and that's a way to get some of these to experiment with. At that price point, I don't mind taking the chance. And if I get one that I can use, that's good. If I get one that I can't, that's okay. And this is another one that I use a fair amount. I mentioned earlier looking at other approaches like net handles. This is a handle for a net, for a long-handled fishing net. I wondered why you would want that until I fished in the UK and discovered that there's a really good reason for having these. This is one that's 7 meters long. It was $30. It's a very robust pole. I don't know that I would want to hike very far with it, but I could. But it's extremely rigid. It's a stiff, very durable pole. It can hold up a little bit heavier antenna. It's not going to support your beam, but it'll certainly hold a dipole very comfortably. So one more thing to look at, one more thing to think about spending your money on. But once you have the pole, then the big question comes up. First, how do I get the pole to stand up? This was the first challenge I faced when I started thinking about making antennas from these poles. I knew I had the support. I was looking at antennas like in-fed half waves or in-fed random wires, in-fed non-resonant wires, in other words, or dipoles. I was looking at supporting those, but I had to find a way to get the pole itself to stand up. The simplest way is just tie it to something. This is that same pole that my wife was using in the very first picture to fish for trout. I commandeered it here in Wyoming in the western U.S. We were out there earlier in the year, and I'm in Montana. I said Wyoming. Thank you, hon. I said Wyoming. I meant Montana, and we went to a state park to do a PODA activation. And I thought I want to put this thing up quickly and see what happens. So I took the pole, I took a little piece of twine, sort of braced it in the barbed wire fence and used the twine, the rope, to hold it in place, and it worked beautifully as a support for an in-fed half wave. Here was the operating position, picnic table at the park. It was Tower Rock State Park in Montana. The radio I'm using there was the QMX. I'm using a little battery pack that would put out 9 volts. I run this one on 9 volts, gave you about 3 watts out. The antenna that I'm using there is an in-fed trapped in-fed half wave from QRP, guys. It's a little kit you get, and I like the antenna. I like it a lot. It's tunable. You tune it by dipping the brightness on an LED. And the far end of it, at the other end of the wire going out there from the tuner, is supported on the end of that pole, of that telescoping pole. So that's the real simple way. Just find something to tie it to. I've been known to tie them to trees, to logs. It's a quick, fast, simple way to do it. But there are more elegant ways. And you also have to say, what do I do if there's nothing to tie it to? If there's nothing to tie it to, bring your own. One of the things that I have found online lately is these little red blocks with an SO239 UHF coax connector on them. And they're threaded on both ends, metric threads, for little spikes. And the idea is you take a spike and thread it into there, one end, stick it in the ground, and the other end, you screw in a threaded antenna. So, being somebody who overcomplicates things to the extreme, I thought I'm going to use that to support one of these poles. And the way to make that work is really pretty cool. What you do is you take a spike Now I obviously could do this just with a plain old piece of steel reinforcing bar or something, but here it looks cool. So I take the spike and I put one spike in the bottom, stick it in the ground. I put the other spike on the top. So I had about 2 spikes and 1 red thing. I take that bottom cap off of my rod after I have the rod extended. Don't do it before you extend it or all the pieces are going to fall out. That's a rule of the universe. So extend your rod first, then take the bottom cap off. And the idea is to use little bushings. I made them out of masking tape on the top spike so they fit into the bottom of the extended telescoping mast. That works really, really well. It works so well that I carry it with me all the time. Here's how it looks on the ground. This is actually on top of Helm Craig in the Lake District. When Tricia and I were there, we had an Airbnb cottage down near the base of Helm Craig. And I decided I had to operate. I wanted to get up there and operate on top of that mountain. So I did. And this was the antenna support I took. It's the spike on the bottom, the red thing. I'm not using the SO239. The top spike with the masking tape bushings and the antenna mast. You can see it there laying on the ground behind it, ready to go on top. When I put it up, there's the antenna in the back. It was so windy. I had to come off the top of the crag and get behind the rock so I could even hear with the headphones. The wind was so strong, I had to put in a little guy rope, I guess, to help the antenna not to fall over. But that antenna there supported a dipole, and we'll talk about how you do that in a minute. It supported a dipole, trap dipole for 40 and 20 meters, and I had an absolute blast doing that. The radio I took there again was the QMX. I took it with a battery pack, the same radio I used in Montana in that case, and it was great. For someone like myself who is learning what it's like to operate in places other than northern Georgia, it was an eye-opening experience to be up there and do that and be in the park and operate enough to have a valid activation with 3 watts and the dipole and the little telescoping antenna for a pole. The guy rope was nothing but a piece of rope that I tied partway up the antenna. I pulled it off and anchored it to a tent spike that I just pushed in as best I could to wedge it into the rocks. The pole bent some. They're very flexible and it bent some, but it held it up just fine and worked like a champ. As a side benefit, a lot of people would come by and see me and be very curious about what I was doing. So it was a great chance to be an ambassador for ham radio. And they would hear me talk and realize I was from somewhere else from the U.S. and also gave me a good chance to tell them that not all people from the U.S. are crazy. So that was a good thing to do. It was a fun thing to do there on Helm Craig. Now, if you're not hiking, let's say you're in the car or you don't have to walk very far, then things like weight does not become an option. Does not become a consideration, excuse me. In that case, I can look at some different ways to support these poles. And one that I literally stumbled across was this white tripod over on the right. When Tricia and I were getting to know one another, I very quickly learned that she loves to do what we call here thrifting, where you would go to the thrift stores. Goodwill is the one that's here everywhere. And you would go in the thrift stores to see what you could find. Typically, they support a charity or some kind of ministry or outreach to folks who need it. And we were in the thrift store one day, and I saw this white tripod folded up. It was obviously incomplete, but it just started screaming antenna possibilities. It was $6, but since it was Old Person's Day at the thrift store, I think I got it for half price. I think I spent $3 for this thing. And I took it home and thought, okay, I've got it. Now what am I going to do with it? I started trying to figure out a way to use it to support some of these telescoping poles. It turned out to be a lot easier than I thought it would be. And what I did was I went to the hardware store and bought a piece of rigid PVC pipe. just rigid pipe that would fit inside both the top section of the tripod and the bottom section of my extended mast. Then I got the masking tape again and just built up some bushings on it so that it would be centered and fit securely into the tripod and also into the mast. The odds of you finding this tripod are zero, but there's lots of others, and you could use the same approach to adapt a tripod and a mast in almost every case. So all I did, again, was take the masking tape, make bushings. I put 2 on the bottom part to stabilize it and 2 on the top part to stabilize it. And it goes together like this. Here I did it with blue tape for one and beige tape for the other. First thing I do is put the piece of pipe into the base of the tripod. This particular tripod has a little locking cam. I lock it in, and then I pick up the mast with the antenna and everything already on it. Don't forget that. You'd be surprised how many times I've forgotten that. With all that together, and I put the mast over the piece of PVC pipe, and I've got a great, great support. I use this almost every time I go out, if I am in the car. It folds up to a piece about, maybe a little over a meter long. I put it in the back of the little Nissan Rogue there in the background and fold it up. When I get to the site, I can put it up. And once you have done it once or twice, you can go from a cold start, have your dipole up and be on the air. I think the quickest I've done it is 7 minutes. It's very easy to do. It takes even less time than that to take it down. Here I'm using it at a campsite in northern Alabama. This particular campground had some wall tents, they called them. They're permanent tents with the platform. And we're camping there, set the antenna up in front, ran the coax in, and had a great time doing parks on the air from this, in this case, a park in Alabama. The antenna is an inverted V, supported at the top of the pole. Here I'm using one of the bigger poles, and this is also a B&M pole. I'm using the B&M pole with the antenna connected to the top. So that's kind of how they can go together. You can also take the tripods, and if it's windy, as it was here on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina, another POTA site, I set it up and braced it against a post on a rail, excuse me, so that the post on the railing helped support the antenna. I did take my all-purpose rope. Rope's a great thing to carry when you do this, and just sort of tied the top so it wouldn't wiggle around. But then I used the wind to help stabilize the antenna, again, using dipole as an inverted V. So those are just some thoughts and some ideas on how you might take a tripod, if you happen to find one at a store, and make it work. Now, these tripods I came to discover later are available brand new in lots of surprising places. The ham stores sell them, and they're nice. They can be very expensive, but there's some other options. And one that I found here just up the street is at the local big box hardware store. I think this one is at Lowe's. Lowe's is one of the hardware suppliers here at home. And they had a universal telescoping tripod. I guess universal covers ham radio too. It's actually made as a light stand for work lights for construction sites, but it was only $25 US. So I bought one of those. Later, I found one even less expensively at Harbor Freight. That's another local store. It was $14. And they do the same thing. I did have to take off the top. I had to take off the top part where the light fixtures mount, but I saved it because I might think of some ham radio application for that later on. So that's the kind of the lowdown on the supports. Either you're going to take the thing and tie it to something, or you're going to use a spike where you slip the pole over it, or you're going to use a tripod of some sort to support the mast itself. I don't know if we have any questions at this point that I can talk about for a second before we move on and look at some of the practicalities of using these poles. I don't see the chat on my screen, but Perhaps, Nick, if we have a question or two, you can relay it to me, and we'll see if anybody's thinking of anything right now about the poles themselves.
I don't think anyone's got a question yet, Steve. There's one or two comments on the chat about using the QMX, and LB8VA just made the point he loves his. Use it mostly for CW, but has a lot of fun, and used it for SOTA and POTA. But no one's got a question yet, Steve. So, I mean, unless anyone in the room has got a question, press on, and then we'll throw it open to a discussion, Steve. And I'm sure people will come in with comments and questions to you.
Very good. We'll move on. And that QMX is a great radio. It really is a neat radio. I love it. Okay, so I got to tell you one thing. This is important. This is worth the price of admission right here. How do you extend a telescoping pole? Now, I've seen people do it the wrong way. The wrong way is where you're acting like Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker in the old Star Wars movies, and you take the pole and you whip it like that, with the idea it's going to sling it out. So they're pretty flexible, and if you're not careful, it can flop around enough to hit something and damage the pole. So you don't want to do that. The way to extend them is to start at the tip, at the very finest section, which is extremely fine, because remember, they're made for fishing. Pull that section out, seat it, pull the next one out, pull the next one out, like so, until you work down to the base of the pole. To collapse it, do that in reverse, and you really need to sort of make that standard operating practice as you extend the pole. But once you get it extended, then what do? We've sort of sidestepped the question of how do you connect the antenna to the pole? How do you mount the antenna? And I want to share my insights and what I have found that works for me. Maybe that will give you some ideas and you can refine them and make them even better. Let's say that you're using an end-fed wire, perhaps an end-fed random wire, an end-fed half wave. What you want to do is to put the end of that wire on the pole as high up the pole as you can get it. Now, we mentioned earlier that the tip section of these poles is going to be super, super fine. It's too thin to have any real structural purpose. However, it does give you a place you can slip something over. So if you take a little piece of insulating material, and it could be a piece of phenolic board or a fiberglass board, it could be a little piece of wood. I've seen this done with samples of countertop material from the hardware store, and that works very well too. If you put 2 holes in it, or maybe 3 or 4 holes, one of the holes is going to be big enough to fit over the top of your telescoping antenna support. If you size that just right, it'll slide down over that first piece and come to rest at the top of the second piece, which sort of holds it in place. That's a good thing. Typically, the second piece and certainly the third piece will be stiff enough to be functional as an antenna support. So you take this piece of material, you drill a hole in it big enough to go over the over the tip of your support, and then put in, well, probably 3 additional small holes in a line that are big enough to thread the wire through. So at the end of your antenna wire, just go in and out and in, kind of weaving it through those holes. That'll hold the tip of the wire. The bigger piece that's slipped over the pole secures it to the pole, and that's all you have to do to anchor the end of it. You don't have to worry about separate insulators. You don't have to worry about fancy knots or anything like that. A piece of something with 4 holes in it, 1 big enough to go over the pole and 3 big enough for the wire to weave through, is all you have to do to support the end of an end-fed wire. It's really, really simple. I mentioned the countertop material when I stopped in one of the hardware stores recently to get something to help us hang some pictures. I just sort of detoured through the countertop department, and I saw these little samples they had. They were maybe 2 centimeters by 4 centimeters of different countertop material. So they had 1 hole in it already to go on a peg. I asked the fellow there if I could have a little stack of them, and he looked at me like I was kind of crazy and said, "Sure, but why?" And I told him I was going to use them for making antennas for ham radio. He got all excited. We talked about that for a while, brought them home, and they worked perfectly. It was very easy to drill the 3 small holes in them. And I throw a couple of those in my day pack if I'm hiking or doing a POTA thing. In case I lose the other insulators, I've got a backup. So that's just a possibility to think about. Now, if you are using a dipole, you have the same basic idea where you have an insulator with a big hole that fits over the top of your support, and then you need to just structure it to support the rest of the antenna. You can buy these and modify them. You can buy them and use them as is, or you can make your own. I use B&C connectors for my antenna connections. So I'll take a piece, drill a hole to go over the mast, drill a hole to mount the B&C, put in my little 3 holes on either side to weave the wire through, and then I just hardwire it to the B&C connector. And that's all there is to it for a dipole or inverted V. I keep saying dipole or inverted V. I would go with the inverted V because that only requires 1 telescoping pole for support. And I found it works just fine. Here's how that connector might look if you looked at the plan view of it. And here's how you would hook the wires up to it. Big hole, another hole for the connector, and then some strain relief holes for the wire. Really simple, and you can make one in probably 10 or 15 minutes. Not much to it, but extremely useful. Here it is in action. You see the insulator up at the top of the pole. See how it's coming over the tip section, which was skinny, and then resting on the top of the second section. The center insulator here is about 17 feet high. Not super high, but high enough. This is the Black Widow pole for B&M. And this particular operation was I like to operate at this site. It's a POTA site called the Dawson State Forest. The interesting thing about it is that it's the site of the Lockheed Nuclear Aircraft Laboratory. Back during the Cold War, when we were all practicing duck and cover and trying to decide what we were going to do when the bombs started falling, the idea came up that the way to make it safe was to have bombers that could fly forever, where you didn't need to land them to refuel them. And Lockheed was charged with developing these nuclear airplane engines. Well, that never really was a success, but in the process, they had a giant reactor. They would operate in open air to test the effects of radiation on things. They were not real good. But that site, once they decontaminated it, became ultimately a state forest here in Georgia. And some of the pine trees, maybe they glow a little in the dark. I don't know. But it's a great POTA site. I always laugh and say, I feel like my signal's getting out a little better when I operate here. But this is the antenna that I use. Telescopic pole supporting a dipole at the center. Now, at this point, it's good, I think, to stop for a second and talk about how you put these things up in the air. I mentioned not to forget to put the antenna on the pole. That seems pretty obvious, but I guarantee you, if you do this very much, sooner or later, you're going to forget. I have forgotten. I've got the antenna up and forgot to put the coax on it. I have to take it all down and do it again. So here is sort of my sequence I've come up with. First, I set up whatever support I'm going to use, the stand, the pole, whatever I'm going to do. If I'm using a coupler with a stand, I put the coupler in the stand. Then, separately, I extend the mast. Remember, starting in the tip section, pull it all out, lay it on the ground. I attach the antenna to the mast by slipping it over the top. And then I put the coax on the antenna. That's the one I forget most often. You'd think you wouldn't do that. I do. But once I have the coax in place, sometimes I'll go right away. Sometimes I'll take some masking tape or a pipe cleaner or something and just sort of secure the coax to the mast so it's not pulling it over to the side. And then I raise the mast and set the mast onto the stand. I found that even with the antenna and coax attached, this is pretty easy to do. It's easy to handle these things, much easier than I thought it would be. But that's the sequence I use. I'm just calling your attention there to number 5. Don't forget the coax because I've done it probably enough for both of us. Sometimes I might need to stabilize it. For a while there, I would carry some bags of potting soil in the back of the car when I would go out and do a park. And if I needed to stabilize it, I would just put those over the legs, and it's not going to go anywhere if I do that. If I forget the potting soil, I can usually find a log or a rock or something to put over one or more of the legs, bearing in mind that the one that's probably going to need anchoring the most is the one opposite the direction from which the coax is pulling. So you want to put it up so it's not going to fall over. And think about that. You'll have to see what your application is and where you need to put the support. That's the way I use the telescoping poles most of the time. I use them to support either the end of a wire or the center of an inverted V. But there are other ways, there are other possibilities for antennas, and I want to share these with you to give you some things to think about. Some of these may move into the category of maybe, as my wife would say, too much sugar for a dime, which means it's getting too complicated for what you get back from it, but they're still fun to think about. So let me show you some of these. One is a wire vertical, and this one actually is pretty easy to do. You know, there's an antenna that's very popular right now in among field operators called the PODA Performer. It's based on a telescoping steel whip, a 17-foot whip, with two tuned elevated radials. It's a great antenna. I like it a lot for 20 meters. But I can do that easily in wire. And this one I want to spend a minute talking to you about. You do want to use a fiberglass mast for this because a carbon mast, a graphite mast, is going to have some effect on how your antenna performs. Maybe a big effect, may not. But if you go with fiberglass, the effect problem goes away. Here's how you do it. First of all, figure out the quarter wavelength. It's going to be about 234 divided by your frequency. Then cut 3 pieces of wire. And I use ordinary insulated stranded hookup wire. Nothing fancy about it. I use wire that I would buy at a ham fest at a rally, maybe back in the spring, in the junk bin for $1 or so. Cut 3 pieces of wire, cut them a little bit long. Cut them a little bit long. So 3 pieces of wire, cut a little bit long, and then pick a pole that is long enough to be longer than one of those wires. That's what you want, longer than one of those wires. So if I'm using, say, a 20-foot pole, I can handle easily a 16 or 17-foot wire, and that will get me on 20 meters or higher frequencies. So I've done that. I've got that ready. Then I'm going to make a connector to attach the top end of the radiating part, the vertical part of this wire antenna. I do it very much like I did the insulator for the end-fed wire. I just take a piece of something, cut a big hole to go over the post, and a little hole that the wire will pass through. I don't need but one hole for this one because of how I'm going to set it up. Big hole for the post, for the support, little hole for the wire. Then I'm going to extend the pole, put the connector over the top, and somewhere in there, I'm going to attach the vertical wire to my little insulator. All you have to do that is run the wire through the little hole, tie a knot in the wire so it won't slip through, and you are done. That's it. That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about anything fancy, but that's all you have to do. In the illustration, we're looking at the top of the pole. The little insulator is sitting on top of one of the sections. A knot is holding the wire in. I go out in the field then, and I put all this together. And the way I'm going to put it together is to connect a feed line on the other end of the vertical wire. That's the part that kind of made me pause and think. I had to think, how do I do this in a way that's going to be easy to do in the field and that's going to be fairly reliable but not too complicated? And the solution that finally dawned on me was to use one of these. I love these little adapters. This one is a BNC female. BNC, well, I guess that's I don't know. Anyway, the BNC, whatever that configuration is. And on the other end of it is 2 binding posts, the red one and the black one. I like the colors. It helps me keep track of what goes where. The black one goes to the shield. The red one goes to the center. So I take this little adapter I take my vertical part and put the near end of it on the red post on my adapter. I take the two quarter wave radials and I put them on the black one, on the ground part of my adapter. So that's the configuration. I found this is so simple to set up. So simple. I just run it through the little post and tighten them down, and I'm done. If I'm going to tune it, I tune it from here. I don't tune it from the far end. I'll just take it, since I've cut it long, I can look at it on my VNA or on my antenna analyzer and see if it's too long. It will be. And I keep trimming it until I've moved it down to where I want it to be. When I have it together, it looks like this. The red one is the vertical wire. The blue and white ones are my two radials. I am going to have those elevated off the ground. And so what I do then is I attach it to my pole. This is a fiberglass pole. This was painted silver and blue. I took the little adapter and got one of those elastic, stretchy things that ladies use to secure a ponytail. Looped it around the BNC connector and around one of the terminal posts, and that's it. All I want to do is hold it up against the pole. I don't need much structural strength. The far end of the red wire is on top of the pole. If I want to, I can take some masking tape or something and secure it so that the wire stays close to the pole, and that's all there is to it. That's all there is to the antenna. Once I have it secured and have it fixed up like that, it's very repeatable if I keep the radials elevated. And the thing that I use to elevate them is a pair of electric fence posts. I bought these fence posts at a farm supply store. They were about less than $3 US a piece. They have a little spike to stick in the ground. They're about, maybe 3 feet long, and they're great for supporting the ends of the radials. For the end of the radials, I just tie the loop in it, little knot, and just hook it over the post. That's all there is to it. This is a very quick, easy to set up antenna that does work with the telescoping poles. And you don't have to have the telescoping steel mast to make this work. Another thing you can do with these poles, if you really get carried away, is to make a rotatable dipole. Make a rotatable dipole. Again, you want to do this with fiberglass poles because you don't want something that is not transparent to RF right close to your wires. But the way you do it, and the way I did it, was I took a wooden block and a wooden dowel, a dowel that was sized so it would fit inside the base of two fishing poles. I picked the fishing pole length based on the frequency I wanted. Had a little center insulator I attached to the wood block. I used my masking tape to build up the wood dowel so I had a good fit in the fishing pole. And then used wire for the antenna elements. I found this to be pretty effective on, well, you can do it on 17 meters, but on 15 and 12 and 10, it's good because it's not so big. It's very simple to put up. The regular wire is simpler, but we're hams. We have to keep trying things, and it's fun to look at different options for doing it. This does have the advantage of being easy to rotate. If I take the wood block, you can find a way to mount it on either the tripod or perhaps on a longer pole attached to the tripod. And that's where that net handle is great because it's stiff enough to hold it. Then I have a rotatable dipole, and that can be helpful to me if I'm out and need that little bit of directivity, especially on those high bands. Here's how you do it. Figure the dipole length, set up your mast, take your wire, tie it to the pole. Zip ties work well for that. Leave it a little long, trim it down to resonance using your VNA or your antenna analyzer, and you're good to go. One more. Got to tell you this one. This is fun to play with, and that's a delta loop. Now, a delta loop is going to require a full wavelength of wire for the band that you're operating on, and it's also going to require a matching transformer at the feed point. How much wire? 1005 divided by the frequency of megahertz will give me the length of wire approximately in feet. I go a little bit longer so I can trim it down, but you do the math. and then decide how to configure it. Delta loops can be either vertically or horizontally polarized depending on where you feed them. If I feed them at the apex on top or bottom, then what I have is horizontal polarization. If I feed it at the middle of a side, if that side is on the bottom, it's horizontal. If I want vertical polarization, I need to feed it at a corner of the flats parallel to the ground side. Now, looking at this, it occurs to you that the easiest way to get the most versatility is to set it up so that the top of the loop is supported by your mast. The top of it is supported by the mast. That's easy to do. Essentially, all I need then is one support. Now, there's a lot of weight on this thing, so I don't need a real flimsy pole. I want to use my heavier pole, but delta loops work really well close to the ground. So for the higher bands, like 10 and 12 meters, and even 15, a small pole will work pretty well. So that's the basic configuration. I like the one in the top left. I feed it in the middle, or the one on the bottom where I feed it in one of the corners. Here's how you set it up. I'm attaching it to the pole, just like I did before. And all I need there is some kind of insulator that slips over the top. I pull it down, I pull out the bottom corners, and I feed it in the middle. I'll need to use a little transformer. The feed point impedance on these varies with everything, but it's going to be in the neighborhood of 100, 150 ohms. So a 2-to-1 or a 4-to-1 transformer will usually allow the tuner in your radio to pick up the slack and make the thing work pretty good. So that's a pretty interesting antenna to play with. There's a really good discussion of them online, and here is the link to finding it. If you're interested in delta loops, go and take a look at this. This is a great discussion with lots and lots of detail on delta loops, and I recommend it highly to you. It's a good place to learn a lot more about them. Recommended links for the polls. These are some B&M poll links, but you'll find links like these from other sources. I get the longest poll I could get, and the reason I do that is because I know that the flimsy top section is not going to be part of my antenna. It's just too fine, too small to use for this application. So if I can find a 20 or a 23 or 26, 29 foot pole, that's what I'll get. The longer that pole, the stronger and more rigid it's going to be, and the better it will be for supporting your antenna. But that's what you want to look for. Look for what's long. I would probably look for fiberglass. It tends to be a little bit more rugged and it's certainly cheaper. Remember, we're not fishing with it. We're using it for an antenna, so we don't need the angling advantages that graphite would give us. I got to mention at the end, if you're interested in the fishing side of all this, one of the books I did, I'm a writer, one of the books I did is called Tenkara 101. It's available on that website, and sometimes it's available on Amazon. If you want to check it out, I'd love to have you do it. But had to throw that in because people always ask about the fishing part. But that kind of wraps it up. I hope I've given you some ideas and some things to think about. I hope I have. I hope you'll play with some of these poles. They're not inexpensive. All you need is a pole, some wire, maybe a matching transformer, and a radio and a way to support it. And you'll be all set and in business. And let's pause now for a minute and see if anybody has any questions that I can attempt to answer. Anybody have anything we can talk about?
Right, fabulous, Steve. Very, very good, and thank you for the work you put into that. I'm sure there are lots of people in the room with comments and points of discussion about poles. It's something that many of us have used already. But as Steve said in his introduction there, they come in all shapes and sizes, and it's a question of finding the right pole for your application. I mean, I can confess that when I filled my rucksack full of radio bits and sandwiches for the day and drinks for the day, and took with me a 12-meter spider beam pole, I went off carrying some weight up that hill because the spider beam poles are so rigid and so strong, they are considerably heavier than those ones that Steve's got in his hand there.
Here's the addiction. This is what will happen to you.
Yeah, indeed. I think you don't really want to carry a 12-meter spider beam pole when you're going up to a summit of a hill somewhere, along with all your other bits and pieces. But you know, certainly it's about trying to get what works for you. So let's just chuck it open. Who wants to go first and make any comments, observations on Steve's contribution there? I would say to you, Steve, just while we're waiting for people to jump in, one of the things that a number of us have also got had great fun with over here in the UK, and I know you've got them in the States, is these 5 meter, just over 5 meter steel telescopic whip.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when you displayed, you know, in your talk there, you talked about that red connector with the SO239 and with the metric connectors top and bottom.
Yes.
Those telescopic whips fit directly into those. So if you're looking,
that is so good. That's such a neat antenna.
Yeah,
So
indeed.
neat.
However, I would say to you, I don't know what it's like out there. Obviously, it would depend where you are, Steve, in the States there, and what hills and what bit of countryside. But here up in the peak, in the Pennine Hills, the southern Pennine Hills, I can tell you those whip antennas need guying. They're very light. They're very light and only 15 foot 6 inches long when extended. But I have to guy mine because the wind just whips them about. It's just ridiculous. And I think you made, I'm going to carry on talking until someone stops me now, but I think you made a good comment there, Steve, and that is certainly for me, and I got the impression for you as well, that when I go out to play radio, I want to spend more of my time playing radio than fiddling around sticking all the bits and pieces up.
Yes.
Yeah, it's nice to fiddle with all the bits and pieces, but I want all that to be as simple as possible, so I've got the maximum of time when I'm there to play radio and get on the band, make some QSOs, make some contacts, and so on. I guess you're the same, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And I have one of those. I think I mentioned maybe that I use it a lot, the telescopic steel whip. I use it on the white tripod. I do have to use an adapter because the mounts that I get here are all, they're not metric threaded. So again, the interweb to your rescue. You've got the little adapters for 3 or 4. Trouble with wind here, not at all like I did on top of Helm Craig. That was windy. The most wind I've had here has been in the Smoky Mountains up in North Carolina and Tennessee, north of here. And there, it's pretty soon you're using a sloping antenna instead of a vertical antenna. It just blows it right over. But it's a great antenna. And when they're collapsed down, they go into day pack and they're easy to carry. Yeah, it's a great one. It's so much fun.
Right, thank you, Steve. I know in the room we've got people who are into parks on the air. We've got people who are into sticking up poles in their back gardens and taking them out, attaching them to their cars or whatever it might be. Do feel free to join the discussion. So who wants to go first into this discussion here? Just unmute and make your question or comment to Steve.
I have a comment for Steve. First of all, that was a very enjoyable presentation you gave, Steve. Even the beginning where you learned how to use Zoom. You and I have had 14 POTA contacts.
Oh, how about that?
And you've reported every one of them, and it was from 11 different parks.
Well, good.
And
how
they've all have appeared on my hunter log. I'm just a hunter. I can't go out anymore. But they all appear on my hunter log, so you have logged them. But I don't have a QSL card from you. And I
need to send you a QSL card.
Yeah, and on your QRZ page, there is no picture of one, so I can't even make a copy.
Well, Well, tell me your call.
My call is November 4, X-ray Alpha Tango.
Okay. I've written
And
that
I
down.
can I'll mail you a card.
Okay. Well, I will
Okay,
make one for you special.
thank you very much. I'll put a card in the mail or a few cards with a couple of the parks. But I have
Oh, well,
11.
that's
You and I have
exciting.
worked 11 different parks, and I also am a QRP operator. So
Uh-huh.
most of course, not as low as you're going with 3 watts. I use a power supply, and I'm running about 10 watts. But
Oh, man.
uh,
Well, every time we have talked, one of those telescoping poles has been part of the equations.
yeah,
How
yeah,
neat is that?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
neat. Well, thank
So
you.
So it's great meeting you, and especially because I'm not only a POTA hunter, but I'm a member of Pennine Ham, and you are too.
That's neat. Now, where are you located?
New Jersey, Southern New
New Jersey.
Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's neat to know. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. And I'll make sure I get a card in the mail for you tomorrow morning.
Please do. You know, in all the POTA activities I've done, I don't think I have ever worked anyone in the UK. I've worked a lot of EAs and other European countries, but I keep hoping that one day I'm going to get somebody in the group there.
I have
I
eight.
keep listening.
I don't have anyone from this group, but I have
Mhm.
8 parks from the UK now.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
me.
So yeah,
Oh,
but of
when
course,
Tricia and I were there, I was very blessed to get to be the first one to activate some parks. I just the luck of the draw, I guess, and
yeah,
it was all with the telescoping fishing poles,
yeah.
and I think it does in that case with the QMX. But I've never talked to one from here, so I've got to fix that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your presentation.
Tony, G4WIF, earlier today, you dropped me an email and you made the comment in your email that we've got, certainly available in the UK, we've got spider beam poles we can buy, which are very strong and very rigid. Some of them, much longer than the poles that Steve was talking about. And DX Commander as well have sourced similar kind of rigidity of poles. Both of the poles are not cheap though, so they are a lot more expensive. Tony, you were indicating that down where you are in your local hams have found a supply of a pole which is you found is pretty good. So just talk to us about that.
Okay. Well, this is the first time I've used the microphone on the webcam. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, 100%, 5 and 9.
Great. Well, this is not to take anything away from what we just heard because this was brilliant. Great photography too. You're absolutely right that if you're carrying this thing, you don't want it to be heavy, and certainly, you don't want to be carrying a DX Commander or something like that when you go portable. What we're doing down here in Chepstow is we've been making various permanent antennas using poles, and we found a brand called Wind Jammer, and you can get them on Amazon in various lengths. And I looked up one today as an example when we were discussing this via email, and a 7 meter long one. I can't tell you how many feet that is. That's too far in the past. But a 7 meter long one was £27, guys, and that's really
Wow.
and that's not a fishing pole, and it would be useless for fishing. It's a flagpole, a telescopic flagpole, and if you look at the pictures online of the windjammers, the very end section is, it's rigid. It's
Oh my goodness.
and what we saw in your wonderful presentation is that you don't tend to use the top end, the top section, because it's too whippy. But for your use, perfectly fine. If you're installing permanent at home, you need perhaps something a little less whippy
Yes.
and perhaps a little less expensive than a spider beam. And 27 quid for a 7 meter pole. You can do a lot of harm with that. And in fact, I've stopped climbing up on roofs now and putting aerials. And so I've got a very long fence line, with some very well set posts. And I have telescopic poles going along. One's holding up the dual band VHF UHF antenna. Another one's holding up the clone of a DX commander, and another one is my new dual band 6 meter and 4 meter antenna, and that one's 6 meters long. And for £26, that comes with a metal spike with a thread on the end and a Tommy bar that goes in the top that allows you to screw it in the ground, and then you just slot the extended telescopic pole over the top of it.
Oh my goodness.
And that antenna is in my garden now. It's been out there for 4 months now, completely self-supported. So there are alternatives that you maybe wouldn't want to put in your backpack, but they're not expensive and they're really very good value for money. So that's what we were exchanging on email today, and I was sharing with you tonight.
Oh, thank you. As soon as we're done, I'm going to go and look at that. That sounds really good.
I'll put a link in the notes in a short while that I sent earlier to Nick.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to check that out. I need more poles. I need them.
You do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Jeff, ON8NT.
Okay, good evening or good afternoon to you, Steve, there in the States. Was a very interesting presentation, very practical, actually. A lot of practical tips and tricks, and that's what we need, I think. And I must congratulate you on your PowerPoint presentation, which was very nice. I think you said you are not a very good PC user, or you have not much experience, but your PowerPoint was beautiful graphically.
Thank you.
And very clear and very understandable. So really, thank you very much for your presentation. I had one. I'm living on an apartment, and my antenna is on the balcony, directed to the west. And I played with that telescopic antenna that Nick was talking about, but that was not a good plan. But I experienced that these mobile whips, which we call them Ampro whips, in the UK and Europe, the Ampro whips, they stand the wind in a very good way. They are light, they are cheap, and if you take them out of each other, I think they are something like $1.20 something. So this is something that you can take on a hill, on a Pota hill maybe, because they are so light and so strong. Actually, if you are in a car, you can drive 100 kilometers an hour with that on your car.
Goodness.
So they are, they stand the wind. So it's a good alternative. Okay, they have these windings, they are shorter than the quarter wave version telescopic quick, but okay, it's a compromise, and they work if you are like Nick, if you have very windy conditions.
Man, I've not tried it driving with it. I've thought about that. I thought that would be fun. You need something shorter, I guess. But thank you. That sounds
I have
great.
two in my car, just in case.
Do you?
For 20 and for 40 meters, I have two in my car that I can put on a magnetic mount on my car, just in case I would need it. It's a plan B, so to say.
Now that gives me some ideas to play with. I've got, because you can't have too many telescoping poles.
Oh, yeah.
I have a short one that I admit I succumbed to the Black Friday sale and bought it. It'll be here eventually, but it's not very long. It's less than 2 meters long. And okay, you're giving me ideas here now.
I think my Ampro antennas, if you put them together, they are something like 2.20 meters long, more or less. I think. Yeah.
Well, I will let you know how that turns out.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the idea.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I've got a question actually to Tony, and just an observation for Steve and everyone else really. One of the difficulties with these telescopic portable whips, the fiberglass or carbon fiber whips, is that over time they will start to get to slip. I can tell you, I've had experience. I go camping every year in Europe, and I've been on the campsite asleep in bed overnight, where I've had one of these telescopic poles supporting my aerial outside, and I suddenly hear bang, 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 and the whole lot has untelescoped and fallen down. The lesson I've learned from that is that you must make sure, if you're leaving them for any period of time, which, I mean, if you're doing it like when I do now when I go camping, I just put a tiny little bit of tape just above the junction, just so that can't happen. And when I do it at home, I don't go to the expense of buying the hose clips with the rubber inside them. I just buy a length of rubber tubing and some of the hose clamps, cut off enough material to go inside it, and fix the hose clamps over the junctions when I'm doing more stable ones. And Tony, I've done the same as you. You know, I mean, I've got two wire antennas going to different parts of my house, one at the front and one at the back, supporting two different antennas. You know, years ago, I would have gone up a pole, up a ladder. I'd have drilled some holes in the wall. I'd have fixed a metal pole in. I'd have put a connector on the top for my antenna. Now, you know, the cost of some pretty decent, you know, poles, you know, in my case, I've got two 10-meter poles. Literally, I've just literally strapped them to the water pipes coming down from the top of the roof, so they extend about 2 or 3 meters above the roof level at the top, and I use those for the ends of two wire antennas. One is an off-center fed dipole, and one is an end-fed half wave, and they work extremely well. They hardly move in the wind because so much of the heavy bit of the fiberglass is held against the wall of the house and next to the pipework it's strapped to. So even in these winds, I don't take them down. So we've had some very heavy winds here over the last few months. You know, we've had 70, 80 mile an hour winds on occasion up here in gusts that have destroyed a couple of my fence panels in the garden. But the aerials were all, in fact, the first thing I did after the last wind a couple of weeks ago was go outside to look and see whether the aerials were up. And I said, the aerials are fine. And then I looked down across the garden and saw two fence panels completely destroyed, lying in bits, wooden fence panels in the back garden, which I had to replace. So the important thing stood up to it. So, but that is, I think you might have discovered that, Steve. You do run the risk of them collapsing on you.
Yes, I've had that happen, and it's exactly the sound you described. That's exactly it. And I do the same thing. If it's going to be up for a little while, just a few turns of masking tape or anything that'll just help it grip just a little bit. The thing to avoid is the temptation to drill it and put a pin through.
Oh, yeah.
That will weaken it and it'll break there. So don't drill it. But the masking tape is your friend. It's amazing stuff for these things.
A replacement for the rubber that you suggested, Nick.
Yeah.
Is chopping up an old inner tube.
Yeah.
Ah.
And I do exactly what you do.
Yep.
Wrap it around the pole, hose clamp on the top. I don't put it over the junction, but over the top.
Yeah.
So it can't now. Because if you squeeze that rim of the pole, it will crack.
Yeah.
And I've had a spider beam up for 10 years.
Yeah.
And collapsed.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing, Steve, I thought you were going to mention it at one stage, but you didn't. Is that I found with the kind of lighter weight and the fishing poles that you were talking about, that you, as you say, you do struggle to get the center of an inverted V up there or a dipole at the top there because it just bends over too much. I've actually got some photographs of me, you know, with one of these poles next to my tent, and the pole is like bent over, almost back on itself, still supporting my inverted V. But what's important there is just to make sure, which is what I do with most of these longer fishing poles, is just knock out the top 2 or 3 sections, the very bendy ones, so I'm left with the more rigid ones. I think that's a decent tip.
That does it. And another thing I have found that helps is if I can secure the coax to the pole, so it's not pulling it over. It took me a while for that to dawn on me, but once it did, that helps a lot. Masking tape again, just wrap it every 5 or 10 feet, just to kind of keep the coax close to the pole. But yeah, I've done that a lot where it goes up straight, it curves completely over.
Henry.
Yeah, we don't live in such extreme conditions. It's fairly benign down in the south here. So we can get away with having the light poles, the very light poles, as somebody mentioned, that are used for flags. They're extremely light. We don't use anything extra at the top. A constrictor knot will do nicely. And we use the wires as two of the bracing lines and a piece of string at the other end. And anything that's convenient, be it a bush, be it a tree, be it anything, even a clump of grass, you can tie the string and the strings at the end of your wires to, and they'll stand up. The other thing that we tend to do is not to tie them particularly tightly. We'll allow things to flop around, because otherwise you're going to fight against the wind, and the wind will always win.
It will win.
One of the counters against the pole dropping down is ordinary rubber bands, because they provide that tiny little bit of extra friction, and they tend to jam the poles as they come down. And if they do come down, what we tend to do is get the sponges that you use for washing up that have a hard side on one side and an ordinary sponge on the other side, and stuff them in the bottom of your pole. So if it does come down, it cushions the fall, and the hard side stops it being cut up by the descending poles.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea to do that. Thank you for that.
Luke, ON7DQ.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me.
We can.
Yeah, okay. Just want to add a few things. This is my spike for putting my pole into the ground.
Nice.
Comes from the sports goods shop we have in Europe, Decathlon. You can screw the steel pin inside, but often I have the trouble of getting it back out. So lately I just leave it where it is, and I protect the sharp end with a cork and put it like that in the side of my backpack. So I don't unscrew the pin anymore, because I've had some trouble sometimes to release it.
That is nice.
I put the pole from Decathlon. Costs about 25 euros these days. I bought my first one for 15 euros years ago. And it's a 6-meter pole, 58 centimeters long, so you can fit it to the side of your backpack. And I have a different system than Steve for putting up my antenna. I take the thinnest part and stick that out like this. Then I put the pole in the ground and set it up. And then I raise the pole with my antenna wire until it's completely up. And then for putting it back down, I just retract all the elements. So
that is a great idea.
It's a little different system. It happened, I used it with a link dipole when I started SOTA in 2014. But lately, I just use a random wire antenna end fed with an automatic tuner. And then because someone talked about these Chinese whips, the 5.6 meter whips, this thing here is about the same length as my fishing pole that I just showed. It's a PVC tube, and it contains the whole antenna. So this goes against the subject of your talk about using poles, because it doesn't use a pole. I just used it today for a photo activation. Inside is a piece of aluminium TV mast, which I made into a pointed end to put it in the ground. There's even some soil from this afternoon inside. I have to clean it out. So I put this into the ground. Then inside, if I get it out, is my 5.6 meter telescopic whip, you know, the Chinese thing. I didn't buy the red, you know, the red block that you used for your spike. But I found on AliExpress some adapter plates. It is a plate with 3 holes, which is metric 10. So which holds the telescopic whip. So I put this onto the spike. I hope you can see the picture like this. So it's on the ground.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Now the rules say you have to adapt this telescopic whip for each band to the correct length and make it a quarter wave. But I like to hop from band to band when doing POTA to chase the park to park stations. So someone is on 40 meters, the other one is on 20, then one on 17, then back to 40. So I cannot stand up each time and adjust the length of this telescope all the time. So what I did is I made this antenna into a non-resonant antenna by adding some wire. And the total length of my wire is around 7 meters. So the telescopic whip plus this wire makes up some 7 meters. And then I put at the bottom of my antenna an automatic tuner. Some will know the display, what this is. This is an ATU100. It's built from a kit from AliExpress. And I put it at the bottom of my antenna. And I send some power, 5 watts to it. And the tuner is in automatic mode. So each time I send the carrier in AM or FM, it tunes the antenna and I can work 40 meters to 10 meters. Actually, this afternoon, I used this antenna. And on 10 meters, I had 3 American stations with 5 watts CW on 10 meters. Yeah. Well, of course, East Coast, New York, and so on. But and I made 35 QSOs in about 1 hour for my POTA activation. So
that's great.
That's one of my antenna projects.
Do you know offhand what the diameter is at the base where you wrap the extra wire?
The diameter of this one?
Yes, sir.
This is, I think, hier latte. Yes, 40 millimeter. I think it's a 4 centimeter tube, PVC tube, thick wall.
Okay.
But
I see a trip to the hardware store in my future.
Yeah, it's. I have a description on my blog about this.
Okay.
on7dq.blogspot.com. You will find that antenna somewhere. But I can send a link to maybe to Nick, and he can publish it around to everyone.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. More ideas, more things to play with.
Well,
thank you.
7-3.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. That was great. Thank you very much. And if you don't mind, Luke, I'm going to we on our website. I'm in our list of links to companies and individuals. I'm going to add your radio blog on there as well, so people can have a look at what you write there. And I just looked in my log. We worked on 80 meters a few years ago, CW, Luke. So I've got you in the log already. Right. Anyone else with a comment or question to Steve? Yeah, Ken.
Okay, right. Steve, thanks very much for a very enjoyable presentation and informative presentation. I'm Ken, G4VZV, and I'm just going to add a few points from my own experience of using fiberglass extended poles. And I've been using these for 20 years now. I think what you have to do in the beginning is think, are you going to use this pole for a permanent setup or a portable setup? Because the way that you deploy these poles and have these clips around them to hold them in place and using tape is good for portable. But when it comes to a permanent setup, and I've had quite a few permanent setups of 10-meter high telescopic poles, and one that I've got that's 12 meters. I think the big difference is the way that you stop these sections from sliding down into one another. And they do slide down, caused by vibration in the wind. It can only be a gentle wind, but eventually it will something has to give, and it gives on the joint. Heat is another one. I know you might say fiberglass, but when it's very warm and then you get a cool day, the expansion of that fiberglass can alter the pole in such a way that they start to slip down. Another thing is, if and where possible, try and use the vertical pole as part of the antenna. For example, a vertical dipole, where you fasten your connection halfway down the pole. So you can use the top half of the pole and tape your wire to it, and then halfway down, where it's a stronger part of the pole, that's where the connection should really go for a vertical dipole. And there won't be much weight on it, because in reality, the coaxial cable should be pulled out at 45 degrees or more away from the pole. So the weight won't be pulling the pole down, maybe slightly towards one side, but you can deal with that with one guy wire. I have used quite a few poles recently, and I still keep coming back to the DX Commander. I've had 4 DX Commanders, and they just seem to be, I know we talk about the ones from Germany. They are very good. They're probably the best. But I've used others, including one here called Spirit of Air. And I can't remember where I got it from. But I used 4 of those recently. I've had a quad loop up in the air using 4 of these telescopic poles from a center plate on the top of my mast. And I was sat in my conservatory only some 2 months ago. I'd got the antenna up at 35 feet, and all of a sudden I heard a crack. And I couldn't believe it. It was almost like someone was cutting a tree down. Then all of a sudden I saw one of the top spreaders halfway up the spreader, which really confused me a little bit. I thought that would be where its strong position, its strong part of the pole would be. But it just literally collapsed and broke. So it left all the pieces of fiber hanging up in midair. I went outside, and as I got to the mast to lower it, another one of them collapsed. So within 5 minutes, I'd got a 20-meter band quad loop of extendable fiberglass poles, and 2 of them literally cracked. I'd had these up in the air for 3 years. And what I will say to anyone is, be careful and judge things like the weather conditions, the wind in particular. And if you can, try and grease the poles to stop them weathering, even if that means putting on petroleum grease, which is non-conductive. But if you can spread that along the arm, then that will prevent, not corrosion, because they don't corrode, but weather getting to them. Because eventually those telescopic poles go from being nice and shiny to going very dull. And it's all to do with the sun and the rain. So that's another point. Consider open wire feeder, which is much lighter than coaxial cable. And even if you bring lightweight open wire feeder down for a vertical dipole and run it through a balanced ATU, you can cover all the bands anyway. Or if you don't want to do that, run it down as far as you can and then put a balun and then your coaxial cable. So your balun's on the ground, and it's not, you've not got the weight of the coax pulling on the pole. So I think I've covered more or less all of it. I think it's down to personal choice, really. I do like the idea of what Jeff said with Ampro whips. That's a good idea. And I like these 5.6 meter whips, of which I've got 6 at the moment. They're just fabulous. So I think I've covered all of it. But finally, on my new radio trolley, I've got a sleeve which is approximately 1/2 inch diameter of plumber's tubing, and it's fastened to the metal side of the trolley. And I use one of the 5.6 meter whips, which slides inside the tubing, which is white plastic tubing. And then what I've done is about 1.5 foot, not even that, maybe only 1 foot from the very bottom of the 5.6 meter whip, I've run some insulating tape around enough so that it's a stopper to stop the pole falling through. And I've made it so that just below the plastic, it reveals the 3/8 wave mounting section from the stainless steel pole. And what you can't do on a permanent job there, if you did it on something like that, is you could connect either an alligator clip straight to your ATU and use it as an end-fed wire, but you know it's a quarter wave by adjusting it, or put a stainless steel washer and solder to the stainless steel washer the wire back to the ATU, which would only be probably 1 foot long, and then you've got it as a permanent fitting for the stainless steel pole. And that was probably my last point. And I just think that these fiberglass telescopic poles have been marvelous for the radio ham.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you put this presentation together, Steve, and brought it out for us at the radio club so that we can discuss it. I think it's fabulous. So thanks very much. Back to Nick or to yourself, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, some excellent points, Steve, I think, by Ken. And I know he's been an enthusiast both of the fiberglass pole and the AliExpress stainless steel whip. I've put into the chat links to Tony's blog as well. So thank you, Luke, ON7DQ, for putting your blog up there. I've also linked Tony G4WIF's blog there, and I've gone to your 4 meter, 6 meter dual band antenna that's on your blog, Tony, for 4 and 6 meters, using one of those poles. And you reference the writing of VK2 IDL, and that's the additional link I've put in there, where he gives excellent descriptions for making the so-called flower pot antenna, which is what Ken was talking about. Instead of it's a vertical dipole, but instead of feeding it at the middle, you feed it at the bottom. And it's ever so simple to make. What you do is you take a length of something like RG58 coax, and you take a half wavelength of what you want. So on 20 meters, approximately 10 meters long. On 10 meters, obviously just 5 meters. I've got a 10 meter one and a 20 meter one. But you take your piece of coax and you measure down half of your dipole. What you then do is strip it, so you're taking out the shield and you just leave the internal piece of the coax, which comes to the center point. And then the bottom of the antenna, you have to have a transformer, you have to have a balun of some kind. And in VK2 IDL, he gives the exact dimensions and width of what you need to have of a length of 13 turns of RG58 on a 50 millimeter diameter, in a PVC diameter, in order to then take you to have a 50 ohm feeder that you can take into the back of your radio. But that's exactly the same as what Ken was talking about there. Instead of a vertical dipole fed in the middle, effectively the so-called flower pot antenna is a vertical dipole fed at the bottom. And the only difference is that you do have to have a transformer at the bottom to enable you to get the 50 ohm impedance. But they are super antennas, absolutely super. And Ken will remember this. A few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, camping in the south of France, I had one of those 20-meter flower pot antennas supported by one of my rather bent over poles, because the wind was bending my pole over on that particular day. And Ken was on 20 meters, working a number of stations from Ken was in Alicante in Spain, working some stations in VK and ZL. And I called in, and Ken asked the VK and ZL operators to listen out for me. And I think I got 3 or 4 of them in the log that day, running, I think, no more than 10 watts, 5 or 10 watts on single sideband. This was not on CW, single sideband, into one of those vertical dipoles supported on a fiberglass pole. So these fiberglass poles are terrific, Steve, really terrific. Okay, anyone else with any questions or comments to Steve, or any other observations, or someone else with some great links or great ideas? Do dive in now. I mean, I know, of course, why Jeff ON8NT, struggled with the the 5-meter telescopic wick sticking out of his balcony. The thing would be so thin and unstable. The slightest wind, it wouldn't even take an 80-mile-an-hour wind. The slightest wind, the whole thing would bend over on itself.
Plus the HOA police.
Indeed,
is around.
And someone's going to notice it as well. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Those
we have those here too.
Yeah, and those Ampro antennas are actually very. You cannot see it from the street side, so to say. So they are very discreet, I think. But such a 5-meter telescopic, which is winding around. No, they were. What's that? What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, and Jeff, apart from anything else, I mean, Ken describing off the top of his 30-foot mast one of those fiberglass poles cracking and breaking.
Yeah.
If that happened on hanging out of your balcony and fell on the ground, you could do a lot of damage to property and to an individual as well. So definitely not something to pursue from your balcony.
No. Keep it simple and and discreet.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think you have to reach the point where your neighbour, and my neighbour has said this to me, that nice big antenna you've got up looks like a structure of beauty. Even I were amazed. I said, you'll do for me. And maybe she needs to go to Specsavers and get some more. But it's a massive antenna.
I have 21 neighbors. I have 21 neighbors in this building.
But when she said it's a structure of beauty, I thought I'd won the lottery.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony's just put into the chat, by the way. He says he's very fortunate his neighbours are too busy eating grass. You're obviously surrounded by animals, Tony, so you're definitely lucky. When I moved into the house I'm living in now, and I wanted to have before I hit on the idea of using fiberglass poles strapped to the downpipes coming off the guttering of the house, I had a broken TV antenna on top of the roof. So the aluminium pole was absolutely fine. The old TV antenna, the UHF TV antenna, had broken and was hanging off. So I decided I'd better pull it down. If I could pull it down, I could still use the pole to support an antenna. So I took one of my Spider Beam 10-meter poles, very rigid poles, and I clipped a hook to the top, and I dropped a piece of rope over the top of this TV antenna and pulled it down. So I did that job, and the coax came down with it as well. So I then just had an aluminium pole that the TV antenna was on, and I thought, well, I can use that as well. So I then put some wire over the top, or rather some cord to pull up some wire that I could loop over the top of what was the base of this TV antenna. Anyway, while I was doing it, I was holding this 10-meter pole fully extended. I could hear my next door neighbours, and I could hear my next door neighbour, who's a lovely lady, say to her husband, "What's he doing now, Clive? There's some pole waving around up there." So I thought I'd better get on with this pretty quickly. So I slipped, managed to do it in one go, and then the cord was hanging over. And I thought I'll leave it to another day to actually pull up the wire antenna that it's going to be supporting. But yeah, we do suffer from that. If you live anywhere where you've got immediate neighbours, and most of us do in this part of the world, you do have these to contend with. So Kenny's very lucky to have a neighbour who thinks that a quad loop antenna, or in his case, your massive 12 or 14 element 2-meter delta loop antenna, beam antenna, Ken, if they think that's a work of beauty, then you've got it done. You've got no problems at all.
Planning permission not necessary.
Right, is there anyone else wants to make a comment or ask a question to Steve before we thank him for his contribution? Yes, Keith.
Yeah, good evening. Great talk, Steve, and I did particularly like the diagrams.
Thank you.
Beautifully clear for new hams, certainly. I'm just going to add that I've got a DX commander here, permanent installation, and the top 3 sections, I use those quick release zip ties to stop it sliding.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just wrap a little bit of tape, and then the zip tie holds it nice and tight.
Yeah.
So
That's a
probably
good
a
idea.
bit messy out in the field with a long tag. You can cut them shorter, but I just thought I'd add that one for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, although they describe them as quick release, but I struggle with those sometimes, Keith, depending on the make of them. But they can be a problem to undo again, I have to say.
Oh, you've got to know the knack. You squeeze and push.
Yeah, when you've done them up too tight, and then you cut them off so they're not waving around, you haven't got a lot to play with, have you? So
That's true.
Okay, thank you for that, Keith. Steve, thank you very much indeed. That was a really entertaining talk, and as everyone has said, you know, your graphics and the descriptions that went with the graphics were so good and so clear, and I hope that you know, when we put this up on our YouTube channel, that there'll be POTA operators or new people to POTA, or new hams who've got into amateur radio, look at that and think, oh, I've got some really good ideas there. So can we show appreciation to Steve in the normal way, everyone? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I wish you all happy and joyous holiday season in this puzzling world we live in. Maybe we need more ham radio. So maybe be kind to somebody this week, and y'all have a great rest of your year and a happy holiday season. Thank you so much.
And the same to you and your wife, Steve. Thank you very much indeed for sparing the time. And I know we'll see you again. So it's not goodbye. 73 is goodbye. It's 73. See you next time. Thank you,
I will
Steve.
look forward to it. Thank you all. And if you ever come this way, please look us up.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you now. Bye-bye, everyone.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to our viewers on YouTube. I hope you've enjoyed the talk tonight. And thank you as well to those who have been watching this, who catch up with this on YouTube later in the week. It's been great fun, and hope you've enjoyed it and got something from it. And do have a look at our website, pennineham.org.uk, and I will put up Luke's and Tony's and VK2IDL's blogs as links for people to go and explore all their writings, because there's some great stuff on all those 3 blogs written by those 3 amateurs. So thank you for that.